Well, on that note, let's get going as time sort of ticks along. So, Paul, welcome to the inaugural Zoom recording podcast, Leadership Bites. You're my first explorer into this new medium for me. So I've done the normal podcast, but great to have you on.
Great to see you, Guy. Thanks for having me.
And we did have a go at this before, and due to some digital doodarery, we decided to do it a different way.
Yeah, mainly my lack of IT skills, I suspect, but there you go. Yeah.
I think it was when the truck was backing up in the background when I went, right,
yeah.
I'm out.
Too many elephants in the background or something, wasn't
it? It was ducks. There was all sorts. There was a woodpecker, I think, at one point.
Yeah.
So
the only thing I'm worried about now is I've still got the dog in here. I can't get rid of her, but hopefully she'll be quiet. But
I think that's fine. I think that's absolutely fine. So listen, we know each other from sort of past conversations, and I would just like to get just from you initially, what is Paul Nanson known for, which is always that great statement, but if people do know you or they don't know you, what would they be understanding about who you are and what you've been doing before we get into where you are and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose really I joined the army a long time ago. I joined the army from school, so I've spent 34 years in the military, in the army. Went to Sandhurst as an officer, cadet. So I've been commissioned, and I went through my career going up through the ranks, and was very fortunate to finish off my time in the army by being the Commandant of Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which I did for 5 years. And at the same time, I was Director of Leadership for the army. So in terms of my leadership credentials, it's really about a full and varied career in the army. And the last bit of which, I suppose, focused in on leadership, and particularly looking at developing leaders with an eye on youngsters coming through Sandhurst, but also through life leadership development for the army writ large.
So that's that's a status role, I think. That kind of holding that position, and just the name Sandhurst itself and being in that lead role is quite a powerful statement. And I know you've got a book as well that relates to that period of time. So it might be good just to kind of quickly talk about that and just if people want to look it up, just what's it called and what's in it, because I know that covers some of that period of time.
Yeah, we wrote a book. I say we because it was a joint effort. It's a relatively long story because so Penguin came to have a chat with me a couple of years ago and said, look, do you want to write a book on leadership? And I was still serving at the time, so it's not that easy to be able to do it whilst you're still serving. So I spoke to the army, and we decided that it would be a good time to do something on leadership, but with a Sandhurst bent on it. And therefore, because we were trying to do some stuff with Sandhurst because of recruiting and getting more youngsters in there. So the book there was 3 reasons for the book, really. One was to show off what we do there, because we're very proud of what happens at Sandhurst. It's an amazing place. Secondly, to dispel some of the myths about the place, because those who haven't been there, those who perhaps read the press, get that view that it's all about posh people, and to go to Sandhurst, you've got to have been to the right school, right university, come from the right family, and of course nothing to do with that at all. It's all about potential. It's all about leadership potential. And then the third thing was that we value hugely our foundation that we get at Sandhurst in terms of our leadership development. Sandhurst sets us up brilliantly for our military careers, and we go off and do these amazing things around the world. We always look back to our start at Sandhurst, and we thought, hang on a minute, would that translate into the civilian world? Would that translate into life skills? So we wrote the book. It's called Stand Up Straight, and it's about translating some of those life lessons, leadership lessons that we learn at Sandhurst into something that people in civilian world can use as well, I hope.
And I find it, we were just talking about accessibility in books actually just before we came online, and how some require some real effort to, you've got to sit down with your notepad and you're going to make your way through them. And it's a very digestible book, I think, and easily accessible, with kind of the kind of points that in some respects might seem a little bit, I wouldn't say simplistic, but quasi obvious. until you actually think about it and actually realize that it's quite foundational. And I don't know if you have any examples of something there, but you go, you know, might sound simple, but actually if you think about it, you know, this is the impact that it can have.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's easy to read. I mean, if my English teacher was watching this, you know, he'd probably say that I'm not surprised, given my ability to write. But you're right. It was meant to be accessible, and I think going to what you just said, then, for example, what we take as you know, in the army, we take as read is probably, when you explain it, it is very easy to understand. There is a very good reason behind it. And does it translate into the civilian world? Yeah, of course it does. So, for example, you know, we have a saying, "Take a knee," which has got other connotations now, I know, with what's going on at the moment. But for us, take a knee means, you know, physically getting yourself, if you're a leader, physically getting yourself, when something goes bang, physically getting yourself out of danger quickly, getting behind cover, you know, let the rest of your team deal with what's going on, because you've got to just take a pause and think about what you're going to do next. And, you know, don't make a decision in the heat of the moment. Think through the consequences, because you're dealing with people's lives. Just take a time out. And I think, you know, you can relate that to civilian world. Of course you can, particularly in this current crisis we're all involved in, you know, where, you know, the unknown, the uncertain, people making decisions every day. Well, actually, in this sort of frenetic pace of life at the moment, actually just taking a few minutes just to think through a decision you're about to make is a tip.
And I think that's something that, I mean, we'll, you know, this isn't always a linear conversation, but I'm really intrigued about, because you've moved away from the military space now.
Yeah.
So it'd be great just to kind of get a sense of just what it is that you're putting some energy and focus into, and really the understanding maybe of that spectrum that working or connecting with you brings, because there's the, well, have you just given there, you know, the observation that, hey, listen, this may not sound like it's rocket science, but actually, if you really think about it, you know, that's what executives need to do, all the way to maybe some of the more in-depth, maybe investments of time with you. So where's your energy and your focus now, Paul? Just to be great to get a line of sight on that, maybe before we go back in history a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've only recently left the army. I left sort of in the summer. And I said to you before we started this, you know, I've been sort of casting a few lines out to try and see what I want to try and set up a portfolio of various things. But if you ask me what my passion is, I mean, I want to stay in the leadership development field. I love that, and I think that's where my strengths lie. And as I said to you before, I think if you were to ask me what part of leadership development, it would be, you know, people call it now next generation leadership. It's looking at those people who are coming, you know, not the old and bold, the people who are pretty set in their ways because they've got to where they've got to, and therefore they are leaders. It's the ones just starting out on their journey who probably need a bit of help, probably need a bit of guidance in terms of how they develop themselves as leaders, because, you know, quite a lot of people out there assume leadership rather than actually you know, learn it. And therefore I think that's where I could add some value based on my experience. And also, you know, as we've just been talking about, you know, the army is very good at that. The army is very good at, firstly, selecting us based on our leadership potential, but then ensuring that it is a journey, that you do get that amazing foundation, whether it's Sandhurst or wherever it may be, but then carry on the journey and making sure that as you go to the next level or you go to the next role or the next operation, you are given that leadership development to make sure you're as well prepared as possible for what you're going to face.
So the kind of touch points with you, if I was listening to this or watching this and saying, wow, you know, what could I call on Paul to do? Or what would I want to go and talk to Paul about? Are we talking keynotes and consultation, or one-to-one coaching, all of the above? Initially, if it resonated, what would people reach out to you for?
Yeah, I mean, a bit of everything really. I'm a coach, so I think I like coaching, advising, mentoring, guiding. You know, I do a bit of speaking as well. I talk about leading in difficult environments, team performance. So I do a bit of speaking, but really leadership development is probably where I'd like to be. mostly, and that's about whether it's individual or team. How do we tailor a program? How do we tailor a development program for your individual or team needs?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do a bit of a dive back, which is, we see the man before us, and obviously there's a future ahead, but you get to where you are very often through either a straight road or a very wiggly path. The more and more I talk to people, and it'd be great maybe just to have that potted history that said, I was born. And then, in a relatively kind of accelerated, journey version of myself, this is how I ended up there. And maybe, I'd love to hear
that. Well, I was born in the north of England. I come from Lancashire, a place called Ormskirk. Pretty normal childhood, I suppose. But from a very early age, I think I wanted to be a soldier, and it's people want to be astronauts and people want to be train drivers, and I can just remember wanting to be a soldier. And I think there are many influences on that, mainly my neighbours where I lived, particularly my next door neighbour. He'd served in the Second World War. His sons were both going through Sandhurst when I was sort of little things, so I was sort of brought up with them, having that experience. And then I went to school, joined the cadets, and so in terms of my sort of journey to the army, it was from a very early age, and my mum and dad supported me, bless their hearts, and I wanted to be an officer, and so I went through the whole process of selection, and eventually was lucky enough to get to Sandhurst. And from then on, didn't go to university. I went straight from school into the army. It was more common in those days to do that. Quite a lot of us there were non-graduates, and therefore, I think 20 when I joined, when I eventually got there, and then joined an infantry battalion, Fusiliers, and really, so by the time I got into the battalion, 1986, so it was the back end of the Cold War. If you can remember the Cold War.
That's a hell of a thing to say, the back end of the Cold War.
Those were the days, you see, 86. So it was all about the Soviet threat. I was stationed out in Germany, and we were focused on that, and that's what we trained for. That's what we were expecting, although we were all hoping it would never happen, obviously. And our exercises, our deployments were all based on that threat. And then suddenly, back end of 1990, the first Gulf War came along, and we went out there. And if you look back at the history from then on, really, it's just we bounced from one operation to another, and went from the Gulf into Bosnia, and then Kosovo, and then it was Iraq, and then Afghanistan. I mean, it's been quite a busy years in terms of operations. So it was I mean, I've had a cracking time. I really enjoyed it, challenging and rewarding in equal measures. And I changed roles, and I did lots of different things within the army. But I suppose was always that leadership dimension. I was lucky enough, as I went through my military career, obviously going up in rank and going into different roles, I was given that opportunity to lead in many different environments, albeit mainly military environments, but having that different exposure to difficult situations, different environments, crisis, whatever you want to call it, and therefore that's where I learned my business.
And when you said, I wanted to be an officer,
yeah,
that's an interest. I mean, I understand wanting to join the army. I can see that. But then there's the wanting to be an officer. Do you remember when you almost decided, or is that, no, I just always wanted to be one? Or what? Because joining army is one thing, but being an officer, that's another step as well.
I think it was, and this sounds a bit cheesy, but I think it was those neighbours that I saw. These two young men who were going to Sandhurst.
Oh, okay.
And I lived that with them, and it just struck a chord with me that and then at school, I'll be honest with you, at school it was an option that was sort of pushed towards me. They said, be an officer, and the more I looked at it, the more I liked the idea of having that responsibility, having that kudos, I suppose, as well. There's a certain amount of attraction of being an officer. And being an infantry officer in my case, that was the the icing on the cake. So yeah, I can't tell exactly when it happened, but I thought it was sort of a natural journey, and I suppose there was a bit of wanting to be a leader as well, I suppose. Yeah.
I'm intrigued by that, and you talked about that helping talent, but those things that imprint on you. So I've been a lifelong martial artist, and I don't remember exactly when, but probably a combination of being a bit bullied at school, watching some Jackie Chan movies. I don't know what it was, but that kind of, I'm going to learn martial arts,
Yeah.
And, and I learned 3, and you go, isn't 1 enough for you? And apparently not, I don't know where it comes from, but it's
I need more belts.
I need more belts, but, part because I wanted to be strong and I didn't want to be bullied, part because I then fell in love with the whole process of it, and there's all sorts of things. But there's that youthful imprinting that I'm very intrigued about as I look into society right now, and at all levels, and especially with the context that we're in, which is, well, what are you going to aim at if you're 16, 17 years old? What do you look at? And I look at my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old, and if they said, what, Dad, what should I be when I grow up? I'm like, Beneckers. But there's something about the exposure to things that maybe, I don't know, maybe I should say, meet a vet, maybe they might want to be one, but there is something about that, isn't there? How we get the youth to experience a set of experiences that one of them hooks them, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting, because one thing I didn't mention about my youth was that my entertainment was television or comics. And if I said to if my 15-year-old walked in now, he'd look at me blankly if I said comic. But comics for me, I got it once a week, and for me the comic I got was a thing called The Victor, and it was about it was basically about war stories. And of course, then it was different generation. The war wasn't that far away, and therefore they were still talking about that. And so I grew up on that. Kids now, they're so well connected, aren't they? They can see everything.
Yes.
And therefore, probably there's so much choice there. You're absolutely right. How to focus in on specifically what you want to do, or what flicks your switch, is probably a bit more difficult. I don't know, not more difficult. That's the wrong word, but it's more. Well, it's just more choice, isn't it? It's just more.
Yeah, there is. And I think as a parent, looking at an 8-year-old who, when he was 3, he walked in and he went up to the TV and went like that. Nothing happened. And I don't know what 3 for, what's this pile of crap? Because everything else I touch does that.
Right.
His, as you say, his relationship with technology and his access to the world is one that I'm very interested as to that, me not curtailing his aspirations or their aspirations just because it's out of my line of sight of understanding. And that's something I think I'm really recognizing. And the relationship even with academics and the notice, I think it's Google, is it, that have put some courses online that are basically doing the 6-month programs that basically going, we don't need you to have done X amount of qualifications at university. We need you to have passed that. And that shifting relationship with what's going to be credible and what's actually going to be, is a university degree in English. Well, if they're going to be an English teacher, but almost who cares? And so I've got to wrap my head around that kind of stuff, I guess, as well. But that'll come to me as I get more and more fearful as he gets older. But,
it's really, and the other thing is my Henry's going through his GCSEs at the moment, so he's got GCSEs next year. But of course, he's of the generation that's saying, why do I need to do biology? If I'm not, I don't want to do biology university. I don't see myself as a doctor, for example. So why? Why do I need to do French? Or why do I need to do this? They're very focused in terms of their needs, what they think their needs are, and therefore they want to focus in on what's the important.
I almost feel that they could do a degree starting at 15. I've almost come to that, as in, that's what I'm interested in, Dad. Mum, can't I just do that? And I don't know why not in some respects, but there is that. It's something I've definitely got to wrap my head around. But at 15 as well, there's that sort of sense of immediacy of things are you know, that's that growing up age, isn't it? You know,
Yeah, and
life
immediacy
is
is a really good
upon
word.
you.
Immediacy is a really good word, because going back to your youngster and the swiping the TV, you know, they want an answer now, don't they? They want to press something and
Yeah.
get an answer. And if you say, well, you know, it's foundation and, you know, it build you up in over 3 years, they'll go, well, why can't I do it in 6 months? Why can't I do it tomorrow? I mean, that's the way they are. I mean, that's different generation.
And this is fascinating. My little boy watched, I don't even have a TV license, because it's Netflix, it's Amazon Prime, and some Sky. So he watches a TV program at somebody's house, and then went, "Can we watch the next one?" No. What do you mean? No. He went, "Well, we got to wait till next week." He literally, his mind nearly imploded.
Yeah.
He went, "What do you mean, wait till next week?" "Well, the next episode will be out next week." And when we left the house, he was brilliant. He's 8. He's really respectful. He went, "Oh, okay." And he walked out the house and he went, "So, you know, that's," and he got the word terrestrial TV. I went, "Yeah." He said, "I'm never doing that again, ever." Because if he can't stream it all now, he's not interested. And his relationship with knowing things is, of course, he remembers things, but he knows how to pick up the phone. He hits the microphone and just asks Google.
Yeah.
So in my day, well, Guy, you won't be carrying an encyclopedia in your back pocket, will you? Well, apparently I will be.
Yeah.
So my 8-year-old's relationship with, as you say, the immediacy and expectation of things, is quite phenomenal. So
we'll be having a beer in 8 years' time. We'll have a beer in 10 years' time, Guy, and he'll be working for the BBC.
Yeah, exactly. The what?
Yeah.
But so listen, hopping back to you know, a career, you know, I remember, and this isn't about me being interviewed or spoken to, so, you know, my stories get parked in that sense, but you know, we've all got those touch points of that really resonated with me. That was that individual said that one thing, and it stuck. And I just wondered if you could share any key moments that were maybe those stepping stones or those realizations around leadership, about maybe understanding the depth of it's a responsibility, not a role, or just when you had a little bit leap in your own learning where you went, I remember that it was that conversation or that moment where something clicked and I moved forward on my understanding of it. And I don't know if you have anything like that you could share that I personally would love to listen to.
I mean, I've had lots of touch points, and obviously I've been thinking about it probably more more recently, because I left and therefore looking back on my career. But I think the first one for me, the first one really was in my selection to get to Sandhurst, because I failed the first time I went to the recruiting board, RCB, Regular Commissions Board it was called in those days, Army Officer Selection Board now. But effectively you go to a place called Westbury and you do effectively a 3-day job interview, I suppose, test to see whether you're of the right stuff to be an army officer and to be trained as an army officer. So I went down and you know, pretty confident that I was going to be, you know, done all the right sort of things, and they said, "Nah, you're not for us, mate." And they said, you know, they gave, in fairness, they said, "This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong." It was all about character. It was all about confidence. It was all about maturity. And they said, "Go away and sort yourself out, and you have one more go. You can come back in not less than a year's time, and if you've sorted yourself out, we'll have another look at you." Wow. And that was quite I think I was 17 or 18 at the time, and that's quite a gulping moment, because, you know, I'm trying to think, there's not many times in your life before that where somebody has turned around to you and said, "Actually, we don't think you are of the right stuff." I mean, you do exams and all that sort of thing, but this is about you as a person. So that made me think about myself, and made me think about you know, character, made me think about confidence, maybe think about all those things subsequently I realized are hugely important if you're going to be a leader. It doesn't matter if you're going to be a leader in the military or wherever you're going to be. You know, it's about you, and therefore you've got to take real responsibility for that. And I did go away, and I did genuinely try and work hard on those things as they'd said, and I took myself off around the world to do stuff, and came back and obviously made it the second time through. So as a great learning point, you know, coming back from failure, picking yourself up, dusting yourself off. That was a great life lesson, and one that continued at Sandhurst and beyond. The Army's very good at making sure that you do fail, because that's where you genuinely learn.
Yeah.
But also that's also where your character comes out. Whether you can pick yourself up and tighten your chin strap, as we say in the book, and get back in the fight. So that was my first one.
And I love that there's two things for me there. As again, I've mentioned this to you before, but that martial arts side of things is all the best martial artists have lost a lot. They have continually been, or they put themselves into situations where they're with people that are better than they are. So they're continually losing. So they get better. And it is that kind of conscious recognition that to be a winner, you've got to lose a lot as well.
Yeah.
And that confidence with it. So when you say you went and traveled, I'm really interested also in that kind of dual need for a person to develop themselves outside of the role that they're in.
Yeah.
And that almost, you can learn process and you can learn role, etc. But actually the you bit, probably just being in a job won't be enough unless you've got a particularly expansive role that allows you to go off around the world and have these massive sets of experiences. But particularly for a civilian, I think, who may not be in those, and you're off to this country tomorrow and that country, 2 years later, where those opportunities are thrust upon people. I often see people that have the role or the it's outgrown them. But it hasn't outgrown them because of their knowledge of the environment or the process. It's just that they're not seen to be of that level.
Yeah.
Because they've been in situ for quite a long time and they haven't really grown themselves outside of the role. And I don't know if that's something that you recognize or have seen.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think it comes down to a culture, doesn't it? I think it comes down to a culture. Some organizations have it, some individuals have it. That is a sort of constant wanting to improve, continuous professional development, continuous leadership development, whatever you want to call it. But it's that understanding that if you're an expert on widgets, being an expert on widgets is great, whilst you are an expert on widgets. But as soon as you get to a certain level where someone says, well, it's not just about widgets anymore, sunshine, you've got to manage this part of the company, and it's more than widgets, you've got other things to think about. That's where you suddenly go, hang on a minute, I need a bit more than this. And this goes to your point about, what else you need. It's about you, whether you can inspire people, whether you can reach outside the widgets to understand the context of the rest of the organization. If you can have the trust of people outside your level, your area of expertise, all that sort of thing, which does take work, doesn't it? It does take effort. And as you say, getting outside of yourself and looking back into your self-awareness and all that sort of thing, authenticity, all that sort of thing.
It's putting yourselves into situations where you are going to be in some form of stretch and maybe even panic sometimes. And that may be something that happened to you 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but you have there is a part of your life where you met these difficulties. And maybe you're traveling the world, and when you got there, all your money got stolen.
Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't matter, because if you go and do things are going to go wrong. So there's something about just getting out into the world and doing stuff, because then stuff will happen to you. And the more you push yourself, the more you're going to learn, because the more stuff's going to happen to you. And I think sometimes it's almost that simple. You don't have to plan what's going to happen to you. Just put yourself out there and it will.
And I think the self-awareness thing as well is about is learning from those instances. So for example, your example there of going overseas and you go into a stressful situation where all your kit gets stolen, and you have that moment of panic where you think, what the hell am I going to do? And then you gradually you gradually work through it, and you'll eventually come through. But then it's the pause and the think and the reflect about, well, how did I overcome that? And what if I'd taken that decision then rather than that decision? Would I have got there a bit quicker? Yeah. And therefore you're learning, aren't you? And therefore the next time you go into that crisis situation, you will have a bit of muscle memory and you'll say, do you know what? I'm probably going to do it this way this time. And I think that self-reflection, so it's very easy to say on a podcast, isn't it? But I think that's what you've got to get into. I think if you really are wanting to learn from your leadership journey.
I think one of the big ones for me as well is the relationship with humor, and that capacity to recognize the humor in the situation, and that not to be not professional.
Yeah.
That to almost be able to go, God, could this be any worse? I mean, could this be any more of a disaster? God, blimey. And then have the human reaction. And I'm very clear when I see environments or cultures where they don't allow the human response because it's unprofessional. And then the ones that allow people to go, Jesus, right, what we're going to do, but they allow that. And I think people that have been out in the world and done, or who are doing things as a side role to what they're doing, or have done things in the past, very often have got a relationship with humor, because that was one of the things that stopped them losing their marbles or getting through it.
Yeah.
So I think that I see that very much as a development thing. So any one more if we have it in the bag, but another kind of stepping stone experience that would be great for us to listen to.
I suppose the next sort of big moment for me was the first time into a combat situation, where the first time that I talk about it at the beginning of the book, the first time it suddenly dawns on you that actually there you are, 24 years old, responsible for 24 men as I was, and you are going to lead them in a life and death situation. So your decisions that you're going to make are going to affect them absolutely 100%. And that was another gulping moment where you have to think through it, and put yourself together and get on with it, and have the confidence in your own ability and the confidence in them, that you're going to do this. And it's a learning experience, isn't it? And I didn't make all the right decisions, without a shadow of a doubt, and I probably made some bad decisions, but we got through it, and it was a learning experience, and lots of things I learned about myself, I learned about my own resilience, but I also learned to trust other people and listen to other people as well. And there were people in my team who were more experienced than me, didn't have the same authority as me, but they were more experienced than me, and therefore, why wouldn't I listen to them? Why wouldn't I take their advice? Why wouldn't I ask what they would do now? And I think that was that first time when I really valued the power of the team, I think, and the power of unlocking not only your own potential but everybody else's as well.
Yeah, that is a big thing that I see, that that relationship with, it's showing your vulnerability doesn't make you vulnerable.
No.
Being able to turn around and go, I don't know how to do this, but you've done this at least 3 times before.
Yeah.
So I'm not losing my positional power by asking you. And that's something I think that as organizations become increasingly complex and people are moved into roles where then their area of expertise now doesn't enable them, because actually what they're looking after is outside of their normal span of control or whatever, that be strong driver, that need to show control, there's a real maturity shift between being in control because you're the one with the answers, and being the person that people want to enable, and it's okay that you don't have a clue.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a real growth moment, I think.
I think also you've got to understand that if you are in a position of authority, whether that's as a CEO or a platoon commander, whatever it may be, you still have the responsibility. You can't abrogate that. So and I think as we move, I mean, warfare's always been complex, but it's getting more complicated, and I think life's getting more complicated, particularly at the moment. If you look outside the door now, it's deciding whether you're going to go to the shops or not now is a pretty complex decision, isn't it? But the more and more times we face these wicked problems, the more and more we have to rely on our teams to help us out. And I think the more and more we've got to educate our team members that that they have a role in this as well, and therefore it's okay to put your hand up and say, do you know what, boss, is a better way of doing this. And actually if you trust me, I can lead us through this bit of the problem.
Yeah.
So follow me. And actually, if you're a decent boss and are humble enough, you'll say, okay, Johnny, you've got this one. Over to you. Let's go. And I think they're getting that psyche. It doesn't mean he's got the responsibility. You still hold the responsibility because you are the leader and you are but you may want to follow him because he, at that point in time, knows how to deal with this wicked problem that we're all facing. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And that humbleness is interesting. And that's definitely a factor. And then for me, there's something about fear. As what I'm doing a lot of coaching on at the moment is that I'm recognizing is that as people are put under more, for the want of a better word, more pressure, more stress to achieve, they tighten very often the controls because the timelines that they perceive that they have and the room for failure is decreasing. Therefore, the response for a lot of people is to overmanage. And if I had longer with more resources, I could give people the buffer to learn and to grow and to make a mistake, and they would learn from it because that's how I got to the role that I'm in. But as that decreases for me, I overmanage because of my fear.
Yeah.
And the stress I see in people is when they realize that they're a good boss doing bad things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't want to manage like that. But their anxiety for their own position means that they haven't stepped up to either pushing back or holding space or allowing trust when they feel in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And I guess is probably true, probably everywhere in every medium and every place and space. But I do see that a lot.
It does. And it all boils back down to the T word, doesn't it? It all boils back down to trust.
Yeah.
And I think the art of leading in this environment is understanding that in a team of 4, if you're responsible for a team of 4, there will be two of those team members who if you let them get on with it, you give them the resources, give them the intent, they'll get on with it. You haven't got to worry about them. But there are probably 2-1 that you just don't know, and you just need to be a bit more directive perhaps with that one person. But what you don't want to be is directive with all of them. You don't, one size doesn't fit all. And I think that's the problem at the moment is people are, as you say, becoming more directive and not allowing people to have the freedoms that they need to be able to drive, to be able to have initiative and to be able to seize opportunities.
So Paul, I'm alert to time. You know, time is a cruel mistress, as a colleague of mine often says, and in the right circumstances, I can just keep talking to you until you eventually go, Guy, I have a life I need to leave and I must now go. So rather than run that risk. So if people want to make contact with you, and I'll leave the link in the description if there is one, but is LinkedIn the best way, or what's the best way of reaching out to you direct?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get the conversation going. But I'd be delighted to chat to anybody about particularly about leadership development. And I think next generation leadership. Getting these youngsters going and helping them find their leadership journey.
Well, I'll leave a link in the description on the podcast to connect with you, and Paul Nanson on LinkedIn is an easy one to find and locate. So just on that note, maybe there'll be a round 2, as things move forward. That'd be awesome if that's a possibility. But are you working on anything else book wise, or is there anything on the horizon that's not secret squirrel that you can talk about?
I would like to do another book. Yes, I would like to do another book, but nothing in the pipeline yet.
Okay, well, I'm gonna motivate you to do a second one. I think. Yeah. Second one. So on that note, Paul, thank you so much for joining, and we'll speak to each other in a second when I press the stop button. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on, Guy. Real pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure.